My name is Margaret Hale, and 3 months ago I buried my only son while my family raised champagne glasses across town. That was the moment I learned just how cruel blood relatives can be. I remember standing in the chapel, my hands clutching Ethan's favorite coffee mug, the one with fading letters that still read, "World's Best Son." The mug was warm from the tea I'd poured hours earlier, but my fingers shook so badly it felt like ice. Behind me, the pews were empty, silent witnesses to a betrayal I could hardly believe. I kept turning my head, expecting to see my sisters walk in, or my brother, or even my mother. No one came. Just 7 souls gathered for a man who had spent weekends coaching kids basketball and volunteering at the shelter. 7, including me. The funeral director leaned toward me with that professional gentleness that makes grief even harder to bear. "Miss Hale, should we wait a few more minutes? Sometimes family runs late." His words pierced me like needles. Family. They weren't late. They were at the country club, toasting my niece's engagement. I didn't cry. Not then. My face turned cold as stone because something inside me broke in that instant. I sat through the prayers, listened to the hymns echo through the empty church, and when the casket lowered, I whispered goodbye without my family at my side. My son deserved a crowd of mourners. He got a handful of strangers and one shattered mother. That evening, when I came home to a blinking phone and a flood of text messages, the truth cut deeper. Not a single apology, just excuses. The party couldn't be moved. The deposits were too large. Ethan would have understood. My sister Linda's message was the only honest one. "We need to talk about Ethan's trust fund. Call me Monday." My son wasn't even 3 days in the ground, and already they spoke of him like a ledger to be divided. I poured myself a glass of Ethan's favorite red wine and stared at his empty chair across the table. My grief hardened into something else that night. They thought they could dismiss my son's life with a glass of champagne and steal the legacy he left behind. They had no idea what kind of war they had just started. The night before Ethan's funeral, my sister Linda called me. Her voice carried that syrupy tone she always used when she was about to deliver bad news disguised as sympathy. "Margaret, I'm so sorry about Ethan. You know how much we loved him. But Olivia's engagement party is tomorrow. The country club is booked. Deposits are non-refundable. We just can't cancel." I pressed the phone harder against my ear, staring at the worn photograph of Ethan taped to my refrigerator. His smile glowed back at me, strong and kind even during chemo. I wanted to scream at her, to ask how a champagne toast could ever outweigh a son's farewell, but my throat closed. Instead, I heard myself say, "Family comes first," though the irony burned like acid in my mouth. The next morning, the chapel smelled faintly of lilies and polished wood. I walked down the aisle alone, every step echoing like thunder in the emptiness. The pastor offered a gentle nod, as if to say he understood the strange cruelty of a nearly empty church. Ethan's best friend Michael sat rigid in the front pew, hands clenched, eyes red. Beside him was Sarah, the woman Ethan once thought he'd marry, quietly dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Mrs. Henderson, our neighbor, gave me a small nod of solidarity. That was it. My entire support system for the most important goodbye of my life. As the casket lowered, I caught the funeral director's cautious glance. "Mrs. Hale, would you like us to wait a few minutes? Perhaps your family is delayed?" I swallowed the stone lodged in my throat. "This is everyone," I said. My voice didn't shake. It was granite, the kind of tone grief forges when tears have run dry. Outside, the March air was sharp enough to sting. I stood by the grave while the others drifted away, the cold wind tugging at my black coat. My phone buzzed in my pocket. 15 missed calls, dozens of texts. For one hopeful second, I imagined apologies, maybe explanations. But when I opened the messages, my chest hollowed out. Linda. Mom couldn't make it, but she sends her love. The party was beautiful. My brother Robert. We'll visit Ethan's grave next week. Promise. Helen. So sorry, Margaret. You know how Linda gets when plans are set. Don't be upset. Not one of them said the words I needed most. I'm sorry we weren't there. I'm sorry you stood alone. The final message was Linda's again, this time stripped of any pretense. We need to discuss Ethan's estate. Call me Monday. Estate. Not Ethan. Not his life. Not his dreams. Not his laugh that could light up a room. To her. To all of them. My son was already a sum to be divided. A ledger entry. That evening I sat at our kitchen table. Ethan's chair pushed back as though he'd walk in any moment. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I poured a glass of his favorite red blend and stared at the deep crimson swirling in the glass. My grief began to twist into something harder, sharper. They had left me to bury my son alone, and now they circled like vultures around the money he'd left behind. I didn't know exactly what I would do yet, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I would not let them desecrate Ethan's memory without a fight. Monday morning arrived with Linda pounding on my front door before the sun had even burned through the mist. I opened it to find her already pushing past me, the scent of her expensive perfume flooding my hallway. She carried a leather binder stuffed with papers, the kind she used to flash at business meetings to look important. She settled on my couch as though it belonged to her and crossed her legs with the confidence of someone certain she would get what she came for. Margaret, we need to talk about Ethan's trust, she announced, flipping open the binder. Olivia's wedding is only 6 months away, and that money could make all the difference. The venue alone is $80,000, not to mention catering, flowers. The dress. Her voice droned on, but I stopped hearing words. My eyes fixed on her manicured hand gesturing across my living room, the same hand that hadn't bothered to reach for mine at Ethan's funeral. I set my coffee cup down slowly, forcing calm into my voice. Ethan's been gone 3 days. Linda? And you're already here for money? She faltered, just for a second, then forced a smile. Life goes on. Margaret? Ethan would want Olivia to be happy. He'd want the family united. I nearly laughed. Ethan, who had once called her Aunt Selfish behind her back, who saw through every one of her games, would never have wanted his savings poured into a party with ice sculptures and champagne fountains. I'll review his instructions, I said carefully. Her eyes lit up, and she leaned forward eagerly. Exactly. I'm sure he trusted you to do what's best for all of us. When she finally left, I stood at the window and watched her car disappear down the street. My hands clenched so tightly I could feel my nails dig crescents into my palms. She didn't want what was best for the family. She wanted what was best for her daughter's social standing. By Tuesday, the rest of them arrived like clockwork. Robert first, with his salesman's smile plastered on too wide. Then Helen, feigning concern with her perfectly rehearsed frown. They sat in my living room, the same one where Ethan once sprawled across the rug to play cards, and they spoke of tax burdens and fair distribution among the grandchildren. Robert cleared his throat. Linda, mentioned Ethan's assets. It would be wise to distribute now, before the IRS takes a bite. Helen leaned forward. It's about fairness. Margaret, your kids may be gone, but ours are still building their lives. Ethan wouldn't want to play favorites. My grip tightened on my coffee mug. My son spent his last months planning how to give back to children who never had the chances yours did. That money was his legacy, not a wedding fund or a bailout for spoiled grandchildren. Helen's lips pinched. You're being unreasonable. You live alone. You're in your 60s. Managing a large sum is stressful. Let us help. There it was, the real hunger beneath their polished words. They thought grief had weakened me, made me pliable, but grief had only carved me into steel. I stood, lifting Ethan's purple heart medal from the mantel, its ribbon catching the light. Unreasonable is asking a mother to hand over her dead son's legacy so you can toast at a country club. Difficult choices. Robert? Helen? Let me tell you about difficult choices. Unplugging life support, choosing a coffin, lowering your child into the ground while his own family clinks glasses across town. Don't you dare speak to me about stress. Silence swallowed the room. For once, their rehearsed lines failed them. Robert's eyes darted to the floor. Helen shifted in her seat, suddenly fascinated by the carpet. They left soon after, their faces tight with frustration. I knew this wasn't over. They would regroup, whisper behind closed doors, maybe even find a lawyer. But I had something they hadn't counted on, Ethan's trust, his words, his faith in me, and I was prepared to wield them like a weapon. That evening, after the parade of false concern and greedy smiles, I pulled out the folder Ethan had left with his lawyer. My hands trembled as I flipped through the notarized documents, the stamped signatures, the official seals. Nestled among them was an envelope with my name written in Ethan's careful handwriting. The moment I saw it, my knees gave out, and I slid into the chair at our kitchen table. I broke the seal with the same dread and reverence one might feel, opening a last gift. Inside was a letter, written during his final week when his body had already grown too frail for long conversations. Mom, it began. If you're reading this, the cancer won. I'm sorry for leaving you with the family, because I know how they are, especially Linda. I've set up the trust with very specific instructions, because she'll come sniffing around before my body is even cold. I pressed the paper to my chest and let out a sound I didn't recognize. Part sob, part laugh. He knew. He always knew. The letter went on. The $300,000 is not for weddings, vacations, or family luxuries. It's for kids who need a chance, education, medical expenses, hope. I've already contacted the Children's Health Foundation. They're waiting for the funds to launch scholarships and treatment programs. Please make sure it happens. Don't let anyone twist my memory into a down payment on status. The words blurred as my tears dripped onto the page. I wiped them quickly, unwilling to smudge his last instructions. He ended with this: You have full discretion. Mom, if they give you grief, remind them that kindness during life is what earns consideration after death. They made their choices. Let them live with them. Love always. Your son who knew better. The next morning I drove to Oak Ridge Memorial Park, where Ethan's temporary marker stood among rows of polished headstones. The grass was damp with dew, the air sharp with early spring. I carried the letter in one hand and a small bouquet of daisies in the other, his favorite flower because, he once said, they looked like tiny suns. I unfolded my lawn chair beside his grave, just as we used to sit side by side at Little League games, and read his words aloud. My voice cracked, but I forced each sentence into the cool air, as though speaking them would carve them into stone. Well, sweetheart, I whispered, you were right. Your aunt came by with her invoices for Olivia's wedding. She wants your trust fund for a white dress and a reception no one will remember in 10 years. But you outsmarted her, didn't you? You left me the power to keep your legacy safe. A breeze rustled the oak branches overhead, and for one fleeting second I swore I heard his laugh, deep, infectious, the kind that used to turn strangers' heads in grocery stores. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. When I finally stood, brushing the damp grass from my skirt, my resolve was no longer fragile grief, it was armor. Ethan had given me a mission, and I would see it through. Whatever battles Linda and the others were planning, they had underestimated one thing: a mother armed with her son's last words. Linda showed up again only 3 days later, her heels striking the floor like warning shots. She carried a glossy binder filled with bridal catalogs and laid them across my table as if they were legal documents. "Margaret, we need to move fast," she said. "The deposits are due. Olivia's dress has to be ordered. Ethan would want us to celebrate life, not dwell on sadness." Her words sliced through me. I folded my hands, keeping my voice steady. "You think my son wanted his savings poured into champagne and flowers? He deserved mourners at his funeral. Linda, not excuses about deposits." Color rose in her cheeks, but she pressed on. "You're being cruel. Olivia's wedding is important for our whole family." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Olivia stood there, clutching a coffee cup like it was a lifeline. Her eyes were swollen, her voice trembling. "Aunt Margaret, can I talk to you?" She glanced at her mother, then at me, and I guided her inside. She perched nervously on the couch, twisting the sleeve of her cup. "Mom says you're holding back Ethan's fund, that you don't understand how much this wedding means." I stayed quiet. Silence has a way of drawing truth out. Her eyes dropped, her voice cracking. "But it doesn't feel right. Uncle Ethan never liked Brandon. And I never wanted something this big." I leaned closer. "Then what did you want?" Her answer spilled out in a rush. "A small ceremony by the ocean. Just close family. Our own vows. I wanted Uncle Ethan to walk me down the aisle, but now he's gone. And Mom says we need a show to impress Brandon's parents. It's her dream, not mine." Tears slid down her cheeks. I reached for Ethan's letter, unfolded the part he wrote for her, and placed it in her hands. "He left you this. You're strong enough to make your own choices. Don't let anyone else write the story of your life." Olivia pressed the page to her chest, sobbing. For a moment, she was no longer a bride trapped in her mother's fantasy. She was a young woman realizing she had the right to her own voice. Linda slammed her binder shut and stormed out, her perfume lingering like smoke. But Olivia stayed, her eyes brighter through the tears. "Thank you, Aunt Margaret," she whispered. "For the first time in months, I feel like I can breathe." By the time the summons arrived, I wasn't surprised. Linda had found herself a sharp-suited lawyer and filed a petition claiming I was too emotionally unstable to manage Ethan's estate. According to her, no rational person would give away $300,000 to strangers, while family members had legitimate needs. I hired Sarah Matthews, the attorney Ethan had introduced me to before he died. She was steady, unflinching, the kind of woman who carried facts like weapons. At our first meeting, she warned me, "Linda's lawyer will try to paint you as a grieving mother making irrational choices. We'll need medical records, Ethan's documented charitable work, and proof he was of sound mind when he set up the trust." The courtroom smelled faintly of varnish and old paper. Linda sat at the petitioner's table, dressed in black as if playing the role of dutiful sister. Her lawyer, Mr. Blackwell, rose first, his voice smooth as silk. "Your Honor, our concern is simple. Mrs. Hale is overwhelmed by grief. She's isolating herself and making erratic financial decisions. We ask the court to assign a co-executor to ensure the family's interests are protected." Family's interests. The words tasted like poison. When it was our turn. Sarah laid out Ethan's documents in precise order, each notarized page like a shield. "Your Honor, she said firmly. Mr. Hale's trust is ironclad. He named specific beneficiaries, underprivileged children, via the Children's Health Foundation. Mrs. Hale is not diverting from his wishes. She is honoring them. Blackwell smirked. And yet, Your Honor, what kind of son denies his only cousin the chance at a proper wedding? What kind of executor refuses her niece this happiness? Before Sarah could respond, the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. A woman stepped in, carrying a briefcase. She introduced herself as Jennifer Morrison, an investigative journalist. She held up a federal subpoena. Your Honor, the Whitmore family, Olivia's fiancé's family, is under active investigation for charity fraud and tax evasion. The engagement coincided suspiciously with news of Mr. Hale's diagnosis and the existence of this trust. Gasps rippled through the room. Linda's face drained of color. Olivia, seated quietly in the back, covered her mouth with her hand. Sarah seized the moment. Your Honor, what this shows is that Mrs. Hale's refusal to release funds was not only faithful to her son's wishes, but protective. Had she yielded, the money could have been siphoned into a fraudulent scheme through the Whitmore marriage. The judge adjusted his glasses, studying the documents Jennifer provided. Blackwell sputtered objections, but the weight of the federal investigation was undeniable. Finally, Judge Harrison leaned forward. His voice was measured but decisive. Based on the evidence, it is clear that Ethan Hale's trust was established properly, that his wishes were explicit, and that Mrs. Hale has acted responsibly. The petition to remove her as executor is dismissed. Furthermore, this court commends her diligence in safeguarding charitable funds from potential fraud. I exhaled for the first time in weeks. The gavel struck wood, final and ringing. Linda slumped in her chair, her shoulders bowed as if the weight of her schemes had finally crushed her. As we filed out, Olivia hurried to my side. Her eyes were wet but steady. "Aunt Margaret," she whispered, "thank you for protecting Uncle Ethan, for protecting me." Outside, the spring air felt fresher than it had in months. For the first time since Ethan's death, I believed justice was possible, not just in court, but in the way truth has a way of cutting through even the thickest lies. When the courtroom emptied and the echoes of the gavel faded, I thought Linda might come at me with more venom. Instead, she stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps, her shoulders hunched, her eyes hollow. For the first time in years, she looked less like my sharp-tongued sister and more like a frightened woman who had finally run out of lies. "Margaret," she said quietly, "I didn't know about the Whitmores. I thought this wedding would fix everything. The debt, the embarrassment, Olivia's future. I'm sorry." The apology didn't erase the pain of standing alone at my son's grave, but it was something. I told her the truth. Ethan wanted his money to help children who had nothing. That's where it's going. But Linda, if you need work, Sarah Matthews knows nonprofits that could use fundraisers. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. She blinked at me, surprised I wasn't slamming the door in her face. Maybe Ethan was right. Kindness during life is what counts. If he could believe in second chances, I could try. Weeks passed. Olivia postponed her wedding and, to her credit, broke off the engagement altogether. One summer afternoon, I opened my mailbox and found a photo. Olivia on a quiet beach in a simple white dress, standing beside a young man in a Coast Guard uniform. On the back, she had written, "Aunt Margaret, meet Daniel." We kept it small, just like I dreamed. Uncle Ethan would have been proud. I held that photo against my chest and let the tears come. Not from grief this time, but from gratitude. 6 months later, I visited Ethan's grave carrying fresh daisies and the first newsletter from the foundation that now bore his name. 37 children had already received treatment because of his trust. I laid the flowers down and whispered, "Your plan worked, sweetheart. Olivia's free, Linda's trying to make amends, and your legacy is saving lives. You gave us all more than money. You gave us clarity." The breeze rustled through the oak branches, and I could almost hear his laugh. This time, it didn't hurt. It felt like permission to keep living. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.